Emily Webb was born in Wilmington in 1830, and she became really the second female photographer in all of Wilmington. So pretty early on, she was paving the way here. Her father, Benjamin Webb, was a portrait photographer in Wilmington, and he did a lot of prominent portraits of members of the community in Wilmington. And so she started as an assistant to him, which is where we think she got her training. And then she attended Wesleyan Female College here in Wilmington. And she always had sort of an affinity for art. So after she graduated, she taught there for 2 years. She taught painting and art. And then around 1864, she opened up her own photography studio at 302 Market Street. And early in her career, she went by E. Webb, so her first initial, possibly to sort of disguise the fact that she was a woman, which may have turned some people off from using her services. But she was active until about 1883. So she had a pretty long career, and during that time, she produced well over 500,000 pictures. The unfortunate thing is we don't have a portrait of Emily Webb. So for as many portraits as she did, we don't really have a likeness of her. She was a businesswoman in her own right, but additionally, she was a strong advocate for animal welfare in Wilmington, and this is perhaps what she's best remembered for. There was a farmer in Middletown who had purchased a carload of calves in New York City, and as they were making their way from New York to Middletown, the Pennsylvania Railroad held them up in Wilmington. And so for about 2 days, this carload of young calves had no access to food or water, and the shipper was really troubled by this. So he made one call to the Pennsylvania Railroad and mentioned Emily Webb's name, and within 20 minutes, the carload was on the way to Middletown. So she definitely struck fear in the hearts of people who were committing neglect or abuse of animals. She was also known for keeping a sharp eye on teamsters who were sometimes known to overload their cart, sometimes out of ignorance, and sometimes, to move more stuff along more quickly. And so she would stand on Market Street and force shippers, the drivers, to weigh their carts along the way, and a lot of times she was right, and there were heavy penalties for people who were repeat offenders. So if you were busted once by Emily Webb, you were much less likely to abuse that the second time. Years after her passing, like 15 years, there was a long article in the Every Evening talking about her legacy as an animal rights advocate, and her house her former house on Shipley Street was being torn down. And again, years and years later, she's making all this news. So she definitely was a mover and shaker in Wilmington. She's sort of one of those invisible people that kind of has been maybe lost to history a little bit, partially because, as someone's going through photographs, if you see the back of a CDV and it says E. Webb, that doesn't necessarily stand out to you. But when she starts putting Emily Webb on there, people who know history are thinking, wow, this is a woman photographer pretty early here. So, she becomes a little more noticeable, I think, when you see her whole name. But yeah, unfortunately, she, over the years, her story's sort of been lost. I would say probably about 20 years after her death, but 15 years after this long article is published. So, but today I think her house is no longer there, and her studio at 3rd and Market is totally changed, and so there are traces, but you really kind of have to look for them and know what you're looking for. She's the second female photographer in all of Wilmington, so she's definitely paving the way for women, business women, in Delaware and probably across the country. But at the time, abuse of animals or neglect of animals was pretty commonplace. People didn't really see it as an abuse. They were work animals. They were meant to work. And so I think she really did a lot to change people's minds about how animals should be treated. And by the time of her death, people, had come around to that idea. But I think a lot of it can be attributed to her work.